Welcome to another episode of The Dissection. An announcement has been circulated by the Ministry of Finance on the issue of the proposed VAT increase. In a nutshell, in summary, it's scrapped. It's going away. No more 0.5 percentage point increase. So if you know, and if you've been following the story, the whole 2025-2026 budget process has been unprecedented. It has been a TKZ fiasco. Oh, fiasco. You remember that? Left, right, and center. And that's how we enter. And if you not with VAT, then you must surrender. You remember that song? That is basically where things are and how things have been. The whole thing has been a fiasco of disproportionate and catastrophic proportions. It has been a movie within a movie within a movie. Why do I say this? Because for the first time in 31 years, the budget speech was delayed, postponed, rescheduled because the Minister of Finance was proposing a 2 percentage point increase, right? Then we had a rescheduling of that budget speech to the 12th or thereabouts of March. And that speech proposed a 0.5 percentage point increase and then another one the following year. That also met with fierce resistance. Then the first vote, which was supposed to take the thing to the next stage, which was the adoption of the fiscal framework. And that fiscal framework includes the 0.5 percentage point increase. That was supposed to be the thing that clears the way. But there was still no way, no path to the next votes because the next vote are the division of revenue and the appropriation bill. Those did not seem to have support. And the ANC then had to just acknowledge and raise the white flag through a variety of systems. In the same time that this was happening, on Tuesday and Wednesday, the DA and the economic freedom fighters took the issue of the VAT Act itself and the powers the minister has to raise this tax without the approval of Parliament. In and of itself, they challenged that, and they challenged the process in which this particular increase was performed. All of those things were a fiasco, a movie, and something that was unprecedented and definitely showed that there is a new chaos in the way in which things are going to be done because of the coalition. And the budget is the agenda, the money. You know, Fagimali uzobona, they say. When you look at the money and how it's apportioned, how it's driven by a fiscal strategy and ideology, all of those things do come to a head when you have a coalition of people who disagree on fundamental issues. So that's where we are and everything that has happened so far. There's now a major scramble to claim credit for this particular moment in political history, in South African political history. The first, budget dispute in 31 years through a coalition. Who saved VAT? Who stopped this particular thing? We'll talk a little bit more about that. And there's also now going to be a major focus on the future of the GNU as it's presently constituted, because it may not last much longer because of the dynamics, because of everything that has happened. So we'll look at the science of that particular moment and we'll dissect it. Let's now look at what Treasury said. What is the basis for us to know that there's not going to be any more increase in VAT as was proposed? This is what Treasury said. The Minister of Finance will shortly introduce the Rates and Monetary Amounts and the Amendment of Revenue Laws Bill, the Rates Bill, which proposes to maintain the value-added tax rate at 15% from the 1st of May 2025, instead of the proposed increase to value-added tax announced in the budget in March. And the crowd said, yeah! Right? Here's what they said. The decision to forego the increase follows extensive consultations with political parties and careful consideration of the recommendations of the parliamentary committees. By not increasing value-added tax, estimated revenue will fall short by around 75 billion over the medium term. As a result, the Minister of Finance has written to the Speaker of the National Assembly to indicate that he's withdrawing the Appropriation Bill and Division of Revenue Bill in order to propose expenditure adjustments to cover this shortfall in revenue. Parliament will be requested to adjust expenditure in such a manner that ensures that the loss of revenue does not harm South Africa's fiscal sustainability. The decision not to increase value-added tax means that the measures to cushion lower-income households against the potential negative impact of the rate increase now need to be withdrawn and other expenditure decisions revisited. To offset the unavoidable expenditure adjustments, any additional revenue collected by SARS may be considered for this purpose going forward. The Minister of Finance expects to introduce a revised version of the Appropriation Bill and Division of Revenue Bill within the next few weeks. The initial proposal for an increase in the VAT rate was motivated by the urgent need to restore and replenish the funding of critical frontline services that had suffered reductions necessitated by the country's constrained fiscal position. That had suffered reductions based on the Minister of Finance. I'm translating it now. Based on the Minister of Finance's previous decisions. There are many suggestions, however, some of them would create greater negative consequences for growth and employment, and some of them, while worthwhile, would not provide an immediate avenue for further revenue in the short term to replace a VAT increase. The National Treasury, however, will however consider these and other proposals as potential amendments in upcoming budgets as mechanisms to increase the resources available. So that ends the statement. So in the first instance, this potentially will lead to more borrowing from the IMF. And I made a full video about why that is something that is not particularly desirable in and of itself, right? So you should watch that video. It's on the channel. Now, let's talk about this issue about credit. Who done it? Who's responsible? And it's not a clear-cut issue, actually. There's a scramble for credit because of the political implications of this decision. Those who are seen to have supported the VAT increase will be viewed as villains. Those who are seen to have stopped the VAT increase will be viewed as heroes by the general public, and that may translate to votes in the local government elections and in the next national election. So everyone is trying to position themselves in ways that will benefit themselves and the party and potentially get them more money from donors, etc. The Democratic Alliance has already been issuing statements, and they're very active on social media saying that the ANC settled with them because of the court case and that they are responsible for the reversal in the proposed VAT increase. The DA is claiming 100% of the credit. I don't know what you think about who owes or who is responsible for this VAT freeze or the continuation of VAT at the 15% rate. Please tell me what your thoughts are in the comments. But I'm going to try to look at the different actors and what they're all saying and where the responsibility or the credit should go. The EFF has also been running a social media campaign of naming and shaming the parties that supported the VAT increase. We know that the Democratic Alliance and the EFF were part of the litigation that took this particular increase to the court. So they put money to lawyers and said, go oppose this, we oppose this, right? So that is what they did. They voted against the framework, they went to court. Action SA, Build One South Africa are interesting case studies in this particular issue because they are smaller parties that voted for the framework but maintained that they didn't support value-added tax increase, that they would negotiate with the ANC and that they would make policy recommendations and that VAT would not go up. Herman Mashaba, Musima Emane, Songezo Zibi, Rise Mzansi as well was part of this conversation. They said, look, we're not for the increase. We're negotiating with these guys within. We've told them we're not going to vote for the second thing on the 6th of May. We're not going to vote for the third thing on the 15th of June. We're not going to vote for those particular bills because we don't support VAT. And if these guys don't compromise or come up with another plan, it's not going to work. So that's what they said. They were attacked on social media. I saw those attacks, those criticisms. But look, it's worked. It's worked. So one side is saying it's because of the court case. The other side is saying we negotiated within the vote for. We said, remember Action SA said, we're voting for the framework. These are our recommendations. EFF said, no, you don't understand, etc., etc. And it's true. that the EFF was correct, that the idea of recommendations is not one that the Standing Committee of Finance can make. But this looks like it was a political move, not a legal and technical move. So on one side, you have the pressure of the courts. On the other side, you have these guys saying we're not going to vote for the next stages if you guys don't reverse VAT, right? The ANC, the UDM, the IFP, the Patriotic Alliance and Good Party were supportive of the VAT increase from the beginning. So what is the truth? I think that it's complicated and no one entity should actually get all the credit. I think if we look at it systematically, we can see some definite points that we give to different entities. So for instance, the Democratic Alliance definitely deserves all of the credit. The Democratic Alliance definitely deserves all of the credit for blocking the 2 percentage point increase. All of the credit. If it was not for the DA, the Minister of Finance would have announced a budget speech with a 2 percentage point increase in February, and that would have been the discourse. But the DA blocked it and the direction. The DA blocked it, right? They did. 100% credit for the 2 percentage point increase. But they did not necessarily block the renegotiated and compromise of the 0.5 percentage point increase per year alone for the next 2 years, right? I think Action SA, Build One South Africa, Umkhonto weSizwe Party, EFF, and the DA all used different strategies to push back against the increase. They worked outside the framework. The other entities worked inside the framework. So who worked outside the framework? The Democratic Alliance, the EFF, MK said, we oppose, not voting for this, and DA, EFF went to court. Action SA, Build One South Africa, Rise Mzansi said, we're voting for the framework on condition that in 30 days, you will then come back with a new deal, no VAT increase on the 1st of May. And the banks, the insurance companies, everybody was sending SMSs. You know, FNB had a notification that you had to click, I acknowledge, to get through to the other side of using the app. To say, I know I have to acknowledge. So this is what was happening. And I don't think that we can say one strategy was more effective than the other without extra information. Because one of the things is that we weren't in the room when the ANC was negotiating with these different entities. We know that the ANC was still talking to Action SA and Build One South Africa and Rise Mzansi even yesterday while the court case was happening. We know that the DA and some of the publications which print pro-DA news are saying that, well, the Minister of Finance was watching the court proceedings and was like, this is not looking good. And then he said, okay, I reverse. Okay. So I don't think we'll know more until we really have insider information around those negotiations and interviews. And we may not, because all of the people who were in those discussions are politicians, and sometimes politicians are not the most honest bunch of people. Men lie, women lie, but politicians lie a little bit more than both of those regular entities, right? But we mustn't take the word of any politician as the word of God. You know, they are not coming down from a mountain with a tablet with 10 words, 10 rules written on it. That's not their status in society. They're human beings who manipulate the public for support. So we have to be aware of that. So that's why I'm saying the truth is complicated. I don't think it's one entity alone that can say that, no, we blocked it in this particular instance. I think that the DA, the 2 percentage point increase, I give them full credit for that. It was their move, their strategic move. Having said that about the DA, it's also clear to me that the DA was willing to support the 0.5 percentage point increase if the ANC had given in to their demands on the Bella Act, the NHI, and the Expropriation Act. Initially, that's really what they were pushing for. They were trying to reposition themselves within the coalition to have more power, more authority, more of a say. Because the ANC basically had been treating them like junior partners. They put them in the VIP, but not in the cockpit. The DA wanted to co-pilot, not to be in the VIP in first class. First class is okay, but if you want to choose the direction of the destination, if we're doing first class flight to Togo versus first class flight to Mauritius or Hawaii, that's a totally different conversation. So I think it's evident that the DA was using the negotiation process to recalibrate their positionality in the coalition and to show the ANC that they also had bargaining chips and that they also had leverage within the coalition, which to be fair to them, the ANC should have treated them a little bit better, right? And been more conciliatory in discourse and negotiation. It did seem for a while that the ANC was just going to do what they want, even though the DA was the party that helped them to secure the presidency. And if they didn't have the DA on the day the president was voted in, they wouldn't have had those votes. You know, the whole direction of the country could have gone a different way. So if the DA is looking at the way things are going, they're like, President Ramaphosa, we gave you this presidency. You needed our votes, our 22% to get across the line. And we helped you prevent MK, EFF, and other people who are rivals to your party on the left. Now you are treating us in this way where you are giving us disdain. You are passing legislation which we're not in favor of. No consultation, no negotiation, no nothing. So they had a little bit of a justification from their political side, from where they sit, to argue for that. But the fact that they were willing to vote for the 0.5 percentage increase if the ANC had given in to their demands shows that their opposition was not fully about we want to protect the poor or the economy. Their negotiation position and strategy was about leverage. And we must be clear about that, because now everyone is coming to say, we are for the poorest of the poor, etc., etc. But no, but your policies are not really for the poorest of the poor. You even want to remove the minimum wage so that people can earn even 500 rands. You'll be okay with that because you don't want a minimum wage. So it's not genuine for them to say that everything that they did was for the poorest of the poor. It was for leverage, and they were willing to make that vote if they had been given more leverage by the ANC, more say within the coalition. I think we just have to be honest about that. But the credit situation is as it is. I don't think one party can gain full credit for that because of the way that everything played out. But I want to say something else. Ultimately, the ANC is the party with egg on its face, right? The Minister of Finance, with the backing of the president, is the one who tried to push this through twice. First at 2 percentage points, then at 0.5 percentage point per year for the next 2 years, right? This would have been the second VAT increase under President Ramaphosa. If you recall, in 2018, Malusi Gigaba, after Zuma was removed, came in and announced the first VAT increase in a long time, because it hadn't been increased in a very long time, from 14 to 15%. So this is something that we saw coming from the presidency, coming from the kitchen cabinet, because we saw Khumbudzo Ntshavheni, we saw Enoch Godongwana coming together to say, listen, we're going to raise this thing and this is how things are going to work, and they were defending it, etc., etc. So in as much as we're looking at the smaller parties, I think that we must also look square at the party that proposed the increase. Because the Minister of Finance is from the ANC. He was appointed by the president, right? And there's no Minister of Finance who pushes through a budget without the support of their president, whether it's the Prime Minister or president or whatever. The Minister of Finance and the president work like this. And if they don't work like this, that is typically when a government falls, or when that Prime Minister or president will be in real jeopardy. And that's the reality. Look at what happened between Rishi Sunak and Boris Johnson. Look at what happened with Jacob Zuma and Nhlanhla Nene. Those situations can cause the fall of a president. So a minister of finance and a president always need to be like this. They need to be ad idiom, right, of the same mind. So while there's going to be an ongoing debate about who stopped the value-added tax increase, and the stopping of the value-added tax increase is welcome. That tax was going to really put South Africa's growth into negative territory. It was going to affect the poor and middle class in adverse ways. And I've said so from the very beginning, that it's a negative, retrogressive tax, very negative impact on the economy, and something that would have really taken South Africa into a negative territory. So there's going to be an ongoing debate about who stopped the increase. But I do think that the focus, besides saying who is responsible for the stoppage, also the focus also has to be about who started it, who actually was trying to push through. Why am I saying this? It seems illogical or disproportionate to focus just on the smaller parties when the reality is they're not the ones who came up with the idea. They're not the ones who are pushing through the idea. They were not the ones trying to negotiate one way or another to get the idea across the finish line, or across the try line, if you will. We have to be quite candid about that as well. It seems to me that people are focusing so much on Action SA and whether or not they are responsible more than on the ANC, which was the one which initiated the idea. Right. So, having said that, let's talk about the GNU. I don't think that the GNU is likely to last much longer in this formulation. The reason I say this is because later today there's a press conference between the parties that voted with the ANC on the fiscal conference. So it's going to be ANC and all of these parties that are within the coalition and Action SA, Build One South Africa, etc., who are outside of the coalition. To me, the fact that the ANC is having this conference without the Democratic Alliance and Freedom Front Plus shows that all is not well within that coalition, Coalition 1, GNU 1, if you will, and that there may very well be a GNU 2 within the near future. And if you look at it from an ANC perspective, it makes sense why they would start looking at this as an option. The Democratic Alliance has been embarrassing the ANC consistently in this process. The Democratic Alliance has put a lot of distance between themselves and the ANC within the coalition, to the point that we're starting to see some narratives forming that the Democratic Alliance is ahead of the ANC in the public opinion, and that they may even be president of South Africa from the Democratic Alliance by 2029. John Steenhuisen could become the president of South Africa if the polls hold, because the DA, if they get 30 or something percent, will be able to form a coalition and the ANC will be on the opposition benches. So that's what we're seeing in terms of the narratives. And the ANC has taken a big L here. It's their minister who fought for this round by round. At some point, Business Day was actually saying Treasury has got a superior brain trust, etc., so they know what they're doing. They were pushing for this up until 2 days ago, yesterday, in court. They were still fighting for it. Okay? So they've taken a big L from the Democratic Alliance as their coalition partner, because the DA has taken the budget of the government to court while being in the government. That's what has happened, right? And we've seen now or heard rhetoric from various ANC leaders, the Minister of Finance, the Deputy President Paul Mashatile, even President Ramaphosa himself has not sounded very happy with the Democratic Alliance and the actions of the Democratic Alliance because of the implications. It seems that the DA, in doing all of this, has crossed the red line for many within the ANC. And many people within the ANC are thinking conference, they're thinking next election. They are relatively young. They, a 50-year-old in the ANC is still looking at 25, 26 years of a political career, 30 years even, because we've seen how old people can get in the ANC and still become ministers, deputy ministers, whatever the case may be. So they want to remain in a position of influence and power, and they understand the dynamics on the ground, and they understand that, look, we've been undermined here, we've been defeated on the issue of this VAT increase, which we pushed for, and we have to regain control in the eyes of our voters and salvage our prospects for the next election. So that's a lot of the thinking that's going on right now within the ANC, and perhaps this is what is driving Fikile Mbalula and others to say, look, we have to now start creating a new direction for how we're going to do coalitions. Big business does not want the GNU to be reconfigured. Adrian Gore, the CEO of Discovery, the Deputy President of Business Unity South Africa, and basically the leader of big business in South Africa, has clearly articulated, in the BizNews conference that they want the coalition to remain. We saw that there was an open letter that was not an open letter, but it was kind of open because they told the media what the letter said. A letter was written to the president around keep the DA in the coalition. Then the president said, no, it won't be dictated to by business. And then we saw a little bit later that they still voted or made amends with the DA and kept them in the coalition. So big business doesn't want this. Something President Ramaphosa is clearly aware of. Big business has donated a lot to Operation Vulindlela and the President's Project Management Office, and they're pushing and working together on a variety of things. A lot of big business people are the ones who backed Cyril Ramaphosa in the 2017 election, and therefore they have access and influence, and they have an ear with the president. He listens to them quite often, works with them, and is from big business himself. So he's going to be cognizant of that, right? But at the same time, I do think that at some point this thing is going to be reconfigured. I don't think it's going to last as long as it seemed to a few months ago. If there's going to be a reconfiguration, they're not going to do it immediately or quickly, in my opinion. I think what's going to happen is that the other parties will join the GNU formally. A process will be created for new parties to join the GNU, Build One South Africa, Action SA, maybe even another party. I think at a later stage, there'll be a cabinet reshuffle, not necessarily immediately. This will be done slowly to calm the markets and to foreshadow to the public what's down the road. I think that's the purpose of the press conference. We'll watch the press conference, see what they say. The ANC understands that you can't make sudden moves about this kind of a thing. They like to let you know what's coming months in advance. They've learned from the mistake that was made by Jacob Zuma when he fired Nhlanhla Nene and appointed Des Van Rooyen as the finance minister. That was the beginning of the end in terms of the acceleration of the removal of Jacob Zuma, right? So they understand that you can't just remove people from the cabinet that people are actually supportive of, right? So the markets and business leaders are not going to necessarily be happy with this, and as such, it needs to be handled delicately. But the ANC, I think, is going to make the bet that even though the market and business leaders will not be happy with the removal of the Democratic Alliance from the GNU, the ANC can still argue that we're keeping out the EFF and MK party. We're keeping out Kwazam Konto and Fighters. We're keeping out Julius. Remember, the DA has said that the doomsday scenario, is EFF, MK, and ANC. That's what they've said, the worst case scenario. And they've said that they actually worked with the ANC to stop the doomsday scenario. So if the ANC can still say, no, but there's no doomsday scenario, we're working with Action SA, Build One South Africa. Action SA is a pro-market party. Build One South Africa is a centrist party. So adding them to the coalition is not particularly a shift in the dynamics of the coalition or the direction of the coalition. President Ramaphosa will still be president. He is still the chief executive of the whole thing. So there's going to be an argument that, listen, even though this seems like, the DA which you preferred to be a coalition partner is out, hey, they can serve a good role as opposition. They can be the largest opposition again. MK loses that status. So they'll hold us to account on the other side. We can govern with people who want to work with us and who won't necessarily undermine us. So that could mean that maybe Mmusi Maimane gets Minister of Education, Herman Mashaba gets Home Affairs. What do you think about those appointments? What do you think about the developments that are happening now? Would Herman Mashaba be a strong Minister of Home Affairs? Would Mmusi Maimane be a strong Minister of Education? They've both spoken strongly on those topics. They seem to be passionate about those topics. Herman Mashaba, very aggressive on immigration. Mmusi Maimane, very ambitious on what can be achieved in the Ministry of Basic Education. That could be the direction that this is all going down in. But will it happen overnight? I don't think so. But we'll have to see. It's a very, very dynamic situation. The press conference is at 11 a.m. We'll see what happens there. I might come back on and give my reflections on and reactions to what the press conference covered and what was said there. Let's see what happens. I may go to that press conference and ask some questions, see if I can get some credentials. It is in Joburg. I'm in Joburg. So we'll see what can happen in that respect. So that's where we're going to leave it for this episode of The Dissection. Till the next one.